Good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to today's webinar. A few housekeeping notes before we begin today. All attendees' lines are muted to maintain sound quality. However, we encourage you to submit questions as they arise by using the question box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We will have a Q&A session with our speakers at the end of the presentation. Additionally, we will be asking polling questions throughout the presentation, so we encourage you to pay attention to your screen and be able to respond in the 30 seconds that are given for each question. Today's session is being recorded, and we will share a copy of the recording with all attendees 24 hours after today's call ends. Before I turn this over to the moderator, I also want to announce a special offer in appreciation of you taking the time to join us today. EPSoft is offering use of their process intelligence tool, expert process specialists, and data scientist services free of charge for the first 10 companies that claim. Visit epsoftinc.com/offer/ to be one of the first 10 to respond to today. It is now my pleasure to introduce David Brosell, co-founder of the Manufacturing Leadership Council. Dave?
Thank you, Anna, and hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today, Wednesday, July 29th, 2020, entitled Beat the Odds, Avoid Pitfalls in Automation Projects, and Build a Plan for Success. As Anna mentioned, I am indeed David Brosell, co-founder of the Manufacturing Leadership Council. I'll be your moderator for today's session. We meet at a time of extraordinary change. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted our personal and professional lives and resulted in a deep economic downturn as businesses in nearly every sector of the economy have been impacted. In manufacturing, companies have been affected by the crisis in a myriad of ways. Some have rapidly pivoted production to pandemic-fighting materials and equipment. Many have quickly shifted to having more people working remotely. And nearly everyone has instituted new health and safety procedures in factories and plants to safeguard their employees and to continue operations. Perhaps most interestingly, though, is what we have learned as a result of these reactions. The companies that had embraced, or even had partly embraced, the digital model of manufacturing we're in a far better position to react to the crisis with flexibility and agility than those that either had not embraced the model or hadn't done so sufficiently. Moreover, as recent MLC research has shown, the pandemic has resulted in an inflection point in the industry's march toward manufacturing 4.0, compelling many to accelerate the adoption of the digital model of manufacturing and the technologies which support it, as the benefits of greater speed, flexibility, and agility become apparent, one might even say mandatory, in a time of disruption. But as we all know, adopting new technology successfully requires a lot more than just writing a check. Many technology projects, including automation projects, don't produce expected benefits or don't succeed at all for a variety of reasons. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into process automation and specifically process mining and process intelligence, as well as robotic process automation, or RPA. We've asked one of our council members, EPSoft, to join us today and provide that deep look into RPA, in particular, how to use process intelligence to improve the success rate of automation projects by better understanding the challenges and benefits, how to build a roadmap, and how to avoid pitfalls in conducting these projects. Additionally, we asked the CEO of Roland Solutions, an EPSoft customer that has a very interesting digital transformation story, to share his automation experience firsthand. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to provide a bit more insight. Next slide, please. In the same survey I referenced a moment ago, we asked manufacturers what they expect the impact to be on their adoption of automation and digital technologies as they emerge from the COVID crisis. As you can see from this data, 53% expect their organizations to accelerate the adoption of automation and digital technologies to create that agility and flexibility I talked about. To me, this is all the more reason we truly need to understand the pitfalls of automation projects so that their success rate can be improved. Next slide, please, Lauren. The market for automation technology is large and growing. In a February report, the firm Research and Markets estimated the RPA market at $7.2 billion by 2025. It is not hard to understand why the market will grow to such an extent. McKinsey, to take another example, estimates that by automating manual and repetitive tasks, successful operations centers are reducing costs by 30 to 60% while increasing delivery quality. So now let's get started with the meat of our session. We will begin with some insights from you via our first polling question. The results will provide our presenters some additional insight to leverage throughout our webinar. Please view your screen now and select the most appropriate answer to the question. The first polling question is, which area of your business do you feel has the weakest process visibility and control? We'll take about 30 seconds to answer this question, and then we'll show you the results. Wow, very interesting result we have here. We have customer service, operations, marketing, and production almost at the same level, with customer service just a little ahead at 26%. Finance at the smallest part. And given the audience, it's no surprise that some of these other functional areas are getting that kind of result. So very, very interesting. Now let's take our second polling question. What do you think is your biggest barrier to getting started with process automation? We'll take another 30 seconds for this, and then we'll show you the results.
Yeah, my stopwatch set up.
Okay, here's a very interesting result as well. There seems to be considerable internal support, but it's a resource question for a lot of companies. And the expense is part of that, which we're seeing at 29%. Very, very interesting. And not unexpected at this point in the year, as we're all fighting to stabilize our companies financially, bring back people to work. So not an unexpected result, but an interesting one nonetheless. So thank you all for answering our two poll questions. We'll have one more as we go through the session. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Rick Rowland, the CEO of Rowland Solutions. Rick, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, David. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I was going to share a little bit about our company and how process intelligence has affected us in a very short period of time. So we are a family business, 115-year-old, really security provider, solutions provider for physical assets. Grandfather started the business in New Orleans. We are now globally positioned, doing work throughout U.S. and really Latin America. Our principal focus is to essentially, make a criminal's life harder to live. That's sort of our mantra. We look at criminal acts and try to mitigate them before they occur. We offer surveillance products, UL certified alarm services, door hardware, locking systems, access control. We're actually doing a lot of face temperature reading products today. with the virus and so forth. And then the physical stuff, safes, vaults. We've built vaults for banks and so forth. Our customer service piece is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week manned station that essentially does reactive repair. It's reactive mostly because if somebody can't open a door or a armored car service can't open a vault or something, it's a pretty dire situation in most cases. So that's where we sit, and we basically do principal about 3,500 service transactions a month. We also do UL certified alarm monitoring, which is where we're in the field doing essentially, watching over locations that are closed down, that sort of thing. And then we offer a networked solution for, say, for instance, cell phone companies have a unique problem because of their situation of where they're at, and maybe in high crime areas. So we've developed products that can be monitored from a desktop and allow that store manager access with ultimate amounts of control. So in that situation, there's a lot of desktop support that's required, and we have an area sort of dedicated to that piece. So Lauren, next slide, please. So our some of the challenges or the lessons that we learned, challenges that face us up front, I think the last one is really the most important, is that I don't think, the old expression, we didn't know what we didn't know. And we had been on or adopted a cloud-based ERP system some years ago. And it really just as a small business starting to get our hands around it. And I think once we were introduced to really process intelligence, we began to understand some of the things that we really didn't know enough to ask. For instance, our current processes weren't captured. We have a particular function in our business, a technical service rep who's kind of a triage person, kind of goes through and really identifies, is it a communication issue? Is it a power issue? We start a process of elimination. This event is then transferred over to implementers or dispatchers, who then take that information and move it into really that kind of starts our revenue cycle. And I think one of the process intelligence discoveries we had was we thought we knew how much time we were spending, and we had our hands around the cost of that analysis, that triage piece. And as it turns out, not so much. So there's opportunities for us, but again, we, at the front edge of this, we're not entirely sure of what, like I said, we don't know what we don't know yet. So it's an interesting step to going into it. Our IT people are now, really feasting on it, I would say would be a good phrase, because they now see opportunities there that are, that are going to be, we think are going to be bountiful. The customer service piece is really where all this sort of sits. In our world, as in most of you, customer service is everything. Your impression, the impression you leave with your customer before, during, and after a transaction is everything. So by identifying through process intelligence where we think we can improve that experience with respect to, how our technical service reps respond, their reaction time, and really tracking that time for potential revenue opportunities down the road is where we think we've seen the most value in this. That's where our best lessons have been learned. Next slide, Lauren. So again, one of the realizations that we've had as a 100-year-old plus company is, and as a company that's grown over those 100 years, as you might expect, we knew we had great instincts in business, and we had great instincts with respect to criminal thought and criminal acts, and really solid instincts with respect to, how to process that information. But as the workforce, present company included, gets older and less active and less energetic, you have to ultimately find a way to synthesize those instincts into something different. Obviously, analytics is the answer to that. So we, made some fundamental decisions about how we were going to really execute on our business model, going away from, gut feel, which is still important. It's still a big part of our process, but less and less about gut feel, less and less about the instincts of what may or may not happen, especially as we expand and bring a new talent into the customer service area. How are we going to be able to, again, synthesize those instincts, that tribal knowledge, for lack of a better word, in terms of what, how they react to the customers, how they create that better experience. So, obviously we need to explore additional processes or additional analytics in there so that we're sure that the customer experience is being fed from both sides. That's an important thing. EPSoft is fortunate for us, a fairly easy company to deal with. I was interested in the first polling question and some of the answers, because I think we felt all of those components in coming up to the precipice of how do we expand on what we thought was the ultimate solution, a company our size, to really invest in, seat licenses with cloud-based software and so forth. We thought that was really nirvana for us, and we're starting to find out that that's only going to take you so far, that there's still a tremendous amount of instinctive knowledge that has to be partnered with that analytic piece, and really bringing process intelligence into it, and having a company that can support that. We found to be enlightening, to say the least. It's been a good experience for us, and I think that there's a lot of work for us to do, no doubt. But as the more we work, as one of our chief leaders here always says, is we have to slow down in order to get faster. And so I think that probably is the best way to finish this short presentation, is that, we're an old traditional company selling really traditional products, but the idea of moving forward into process intelligence is really exciting for us. Back to you, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick. A very interesting journey that you're on, moving from kind of that tribal knowledge to more of a data-driven, analytics-driven company. I'm sure many of the companies on the call today are in that journey as well, so your insights are very helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
So next up are EPSoft's president, Brenda Bazan, and the company's CTO, Andrew Leichter. But before we turn it over to them, we have one more polling question for you. The question is, what RPA benefit is most appealing to your organization? So take a few seconds and answer it as best you can, and we'll show the results when you've completed. Okay. Well, very strong result around improving productivity in general, but a very respectable results around cost reduction, which is always a perennial for manufacturing companies, part of continuous improvement, as well as improved quality and accuracy. Very interesting. but that productivity one really stands out. So with that in mind, we will now move to hear from EPSoft's President Brenda Bazan and Andrew Leichter. They may want to comment on some of these poll results. So Brenda, please take it away first.
Yeah, thank you. No, those were very interesting poll results. And I guess I want to start first by thanking Rick. I mean, obviously it's always wonderful when a customer joins you to talk about their experience and to talk about what they've learned, but he's pretty modest, because I also want to say that they are over 100 years old company that started out being a manufacturer of hard goods and have transformed themselves into the modern era of being a services business. And so that probably is a story that resonates with a lot of the people that are on this call, because we are all in this journey of trying to figure out what is it that we provide and how do we blend the goods that we produce with the services that we offer and create an exceptional customer experience. And they've been on that journey. And before we got involved with Roland in the last 5 years, they had also been on this digital transformation journey. So they were in a great place because they had already made a lot of strides. And so doing the process intelligence work with them was easy because they also were well positioned. They had good data. They were open about sharing that data. So it was a great experience for both of our companies, and I'm very pleased that Rick was able to share that with us. So the first thing I want to talk about, Lauren, if you'll get me to the first chart, is the question of why are we talking about this? I mean, obviously you got most of the people on this call are either have already implemented some RPA, or you're in the midst of doing it and you're coming up against struggles. And so the question is, what are people doing and why are they doing it? Last year, Gartner said that 92% of companies in 2020 would be implementing RPA in some form. And as you saw from Dave's remarks, that is likely to only be accelerating. So from 92 to probably as close to 100 as you can get across the board, people are looking for ways to benefit from the advances that RPA brings. And so why is that? Well, first of all, unlike transforming your systems through a traditional software upgrade, RPA allows you to work on the front end of the system. So it interfaces with your legacy systems in the same way that people do. And that means it's easy to define where those gaps exist and how you can basically help advance a process between your legacy systems or move data between legacy systems, because it's the same way that people are currently interfacing with your systems. And I do know that a lot of press has been given around using RPA to replace people. And I will tell you, this chart says it, and I think the question that we got previously also shows that what we're really looking for is a way to make the people we've got work better and make the experience of working in our companies better by helping them be more productive and helping the quality of their work go up. So we have definitely got examples of that in our customer set. I'll just share a simple example. We have plenty more, but one simple example of a person who was handling, it was in the inventory management of a mid-market manufacturing company, and spent a lot of time taking printouts from receiving and then data entering all of that information into the inventory system. And it was such a simple fix when we saw that we were able to basically build a bot that would read that information and then put it in for the this agent. And I'll tell you, at the end of that experience, she was able to take the first vacation she had taken in years. So that was one thing. Great employee experience. But for the company, she was also able to uncover very important information about their inventory that they hadn't seen before because she didn't have the time to go into there. So they uncovered some inventory that was not accounted for, and she was able to basically to do the things that humans are good at, which is strategy, analysis, doing the kind of research work that she was not able to do when she was simply doing route data entry. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at on the why RPA. Are there ways that we can improve the way people are doing their work and therefore provide a lot of benefit to the company? Go ahead and go forward, Lauren. So what we did find is that this is the what people are doing. They are in fact taking, and this is the results of a McKinsey study, where 80% of the physical work, 69% of data processing, and 64% of data collection activities are absolutely great candidates for automation. So just like the example I told you before, taking information, keying it in, processing information, and analyzing it. This is all stuff that can easily be solved with RPA. And this one says that you get a 60% cost reduction in the first year. I will tell you that in our case, we generally tell our customers they'll get the ROI in the first year, but the fact is we've had no projects that didn't receive their ROI in the first 90 days. It's usually there are unexpected results that cause people to get great ROI early on in the project. And those things then just become a snowball because people begin to imagine when they have their first success, well, if I can do that, I can also do this other thing. And then the ideas come out usually, sometimes out of the IT department, sometimes out of the operations teams. They're the people who are entering data into the system. They're the ones working with customers, and they often are the ones coming up with very creative approaches to automate existing processes. So, but we will find that one of the reasons people do this, one of the big reasons people do this is the lack of resources. The inability to hire enough people becomes a limitation to growth. We have one of our first customers that we worked with years ago. They were growing. They grew from $500 million to $1.2 billion the year we were working with them. They've grown quite a bit more since then. They did not have market limitations to their growth. They did not have demand limitations to their growth. They had a labor market limitation. They are in a small town, and they couldn't hire enough people with the skills to help them grow. So when we came in and were able to build some automation projects, they were able to realize that growth much more easily without dramatically expanding their workforce. So this is one of the things we like to keep in mind with customers. It's not about cutting resources, because all of you, we know the situation with globally with manufacturing, there's a resource constraint. So what we're looking for is to say, how do we make the people we've got more productive? How do we make the job easier to do? And how do we fluff up our own financial returns by using automation? So you can go to the next chart. So statistically speaking, as I said, it's really not a question of why. I mean, it's a question of when and what do you do. But if it's such a great idea, why do 2 out of 3 projects fail? Right? If all those things I just said are true, which is that there's many ways to do it, many good applications, why is it that when we do the research, so many of these implementations fail? So you can move through the chart more. And the first reason, yes, thank you, they don't have to. The first reason is that we rely on information from people. So probably there's nobody in this conference call that hasn't been in a windowless room with flip chart papers for a couple of days trying to map out processes. This is a very normal approach to mapping processes. And while it has been effective, it is dependent on what people know about how processes are done. And what people know, as we found out, is quite different from what the systems can tell us. So being able to actually mine your systems and pull out the information about how processes are in fact being performed and all the various ways they are being performed, not just the most common way, but all of the different variations based on problems in the system or different ways people work, that tends to provide a lot more information. So relying on people versus relying on data is one of the first issues. The second issue is oftentimes we choose the wrong things to automate. When we've gone into some of these problems, working with some customers, they know what their end problem is. So for instance, in customer service, it's not Rick, but in other cases, many of you put up customer service, you may know that you have a customer service problem. Either there's a lot of people on it, you have slow response time, so you know what the end problem is. But figuring out where along the way you're getting the issue, it's much more complex. So people tend to have a predisposition to what's the problem, and they go and attack that. Or the other thing people do is they automate things that really are best for people to do. It's always been curious how some companies choose to automate customer service. The one time a customer picks up the phone and calls you and wants to talk to a human, we make them go through lots of automation hurdles. So why are we then using automation for that, which is the one thing you want to preserve, which is the relationship with your customer? Sometimes it makes sense, but a lot of times it doesn't. And therefore we end up harming our relationship with our customers instead of helping it. And then the last reason that they fail is just from a standpoint of not having good planning. If you're not starting with good data, if you're starting with assumptions or, as Rick said, instincts, you may then have a poor plan for how you get to success. So what I'm telling you is that all along the way, what we're discussing is how do we improve our chances of succeeding by getting more access to detailed information and accurate information. So next chart, Lauren. So how do we do this? There are tools that exist, and they are called process mining tools. And we're going to go into a little bit of detail, but the point is, if we start with the tools that help us discover how our processes are in fact being performed in our business, and we can go into great detail and see where are the bottlenecks, where are the problems, where errors are causing steps to be redone back and forth, maybe sent back to one step and then forward to another step. Those, you can see that if you can map your processes from the system. And when you see that, you can more accurately figure out where your problems are, implement automation, and then continue that process. Just because you've analyzed it once doesn't mean you stop. So you implement your system and then you continue analyzing. Did I achieve the objectives? Was I able to break down that bottleneck? Was I able to cause a process to move more efficiently based on this automation of the step? And you may find, okay, I stopped too soon. I needed to automate the next step. So this closed loop of using a tool for discovery, analyzing what it tells you, implementing, and then continuing to optimize is the best way for you to be sure that the projects that you take on have the greatest chance at success. All right, so what does this look like? So I want to introduce Andrew Lecter, who's our CTO, and he's going to take you through a quick view of how do you start and what does it look like? Andrew?
Okay, great. Thanks, Brenda. I'm glad to be here. Again, I'm Andrew Lecter. I am the CTO of EPSoft. And as Brenda talked about this continuous improvement cycle, I'm going to go through just a little bit more detail on kind of what does that look like within each phase. But it's important to reiterate some of the points Brenda was talking about, because we're really here to talk about how do we beat the odds and how do we really avoid the pitfalls. So just to quickly reiterate that, because it really is critical. One of the mistakes we have a tendency to make is, again, to focus on the future state first. And so jumping to conclusions about where is the problem to solve. So that means we really need to be looking at current state first and how do we move through that. And if we think again about the situation Brenda was really talking about, being in a room, sticky notes, big white paper where we're walking through process. The pitfall of that is that we're looking at it from the person's perspective and we're not looking at it from the system's perspective. And so we're going to get subjective outcomes from that. That, rightly so, we might meet with some set of criticism. So if we discover in this phase, if we discover from the perspective of the system, we're going to get more objective results because we're going to see exactly really what is the system producing. And we are all on this digital transformation journey. And what's interesting about that is the opportunities that it's really allowing us to use some of these new tools and techniques to really do good discovery on our process. So as we look at this, what we'll find, and you can look at these two examples here on the screen, we find that we typically really think about our processes from the process that we've constructed and how it really goes from top to bottom as we move through a process, regardless of what it is, customer service, manufacturing, operations, etc. What we don't take into consideration are really these hidden variations that are in the process. And this is really what we want to try to call out as we go through this discovery phase. It really is about looking at your process from the perspective of the system versus necessarily the perspective of the people. Now, obviously, that's critical. I mean, you have to consider the human impact to any sort of process, but the human impact is going to have a little bit of bias, where the system impact is going to have a little bit more of an objective view. So it is really looking for those bottlenecks. And it's really not in just the bottlenecks that we're looking for. We're also looking for what really is the amount of variation that we see in the process. As we use these tools like process mining, one of the surprises that comes out of this is that we get to really see what is really the total variation of deviation from the ideal process that we're really seeing occurring within our space. And the way we get there is through this process mining exercise. And process mining is really, it comes out of academic circles, but the reason why it's now beginning to start to become more mainstream in business, again, goes back to the digital transformation and that journey that we're on. Because it works best when we focus on processes that are unstructured or semi-structured but digitized. As we go through that, it really allows these analytic tools to go through and provide the true history of really what transpires in the process. So how does it work? How does it look? What do we have to do when we're trying to execute something in the process mining space? What it means is we really have to go after the true event logs that are in the system that really tell us the truth about what's going on and what happens. That may be an exercise with your IT department. That may be an exercise with your vendor. It may be just an exercise with your operational folks who really do know the process and know the tool. What we really have to call out is events that really tell us a couple different things, and it's really 4 simple attributes that we want to capture. It's around what's the activity that's getting executed in the process? When did that activity start? When did that activity end? And some sort of identifier that tells us what's the specific instance or case, be able to segregate that data in that way. And that part of it can be challenging if you really don't understand where to go get your logs. But if you partner with the right people, and if your IT department really knows their systems, it really can be relatively straightforward to go after and get those logs. Once you're able to get those, another challenge that we sometimes see is really about just taking that data and structuring it in a way that is useful for the tool. And so what that really says is you really want to make sure that as you're selecting the process mining tool that you're going to use, you want it to be something that is easy to be able to manipulate your event data set in order to be able to put it and get it into the tool in the right place. So how that looks and how we interact with it, once we see process mining execute, we want to be able to walk through the output and be able to see the different variations that are produced from that. We've actually got a video here that we'll share towards the end of this presentation where we'll show you a little bit more and you'll get a better visual kind of on what that looks like. But as we go through the discovery phase, it's really about and critical about really what comes next. So now that we would have this data as we walk through this process mining exercise, now we've got to see how do we act on it. So next slide. So as we look at this, this really takes us to the process intelligence piece of process mining. And so this is about taking the process data that we've generated, these process graphs that we've generated with these events that we've taken from our systems, and being able to take that data and really analyze it in such a way that it can provide us the insights that we're really looking for in order to find out where is the best place to automate, or where are the challenges or some of the surprises we've seen in our business process that we really need to go correct. Some of the examples I think that both Rick and Brenda have already brought up are great examples of how to use this tool. And working with Roland, one of my favorite phrases that came out of that was this idea of shifting process decisions from instinct to analytics. As we take this data and really start to couple it with additional data points that are really specific to your business, that is where some of this process intelligence insights can really come out and shine. So for example, we take a look at those 4 attributes we talked about. If we couple that with additional attributes such as your product category, your customer, those kinds of things, that are specific to your business, it really allows us to take that data, take the output of that process intelligence, that process mining exercise, and really be able to understand where is our potential return on investment for this investment, for the exercise of going through this. So we really want to be able to utilize the cross-section of all this data to really highlight what are the most common variants through your process path? What are the least common variants? What's the fastest process to get through that? And then really even what's the slowest variant to get through that? That's really focusing on your bottleneck. If we're using these tools together, which is really part of an extension of the typical business intelligence skill sets that are probably already embedded in your business, this can then allow us to also begin to take some of the next steps with this process intelligence analysis, bringing in capabilities like artificial intelligence or machine learning over the life cycle of events. And again, through this iterative process that Brenda talked about, really allowing us to continue to optimize the process as we go forward. So as we get through this phase here of analysis, then it really takes us to, all right, now how do we implement it? How do we optimize it? So next slide, please. So as we look at now, we've gone through the process mining piece, we've gone through the process intelligence piece. Now where do we take it? What we'll see with process mining and with process intelligence is that there are still going to be, because it's an unstructured or semi-structured process, there are still going to be some gaps in the process that you just have to know. So again, back to Rick's original point, which is the system and using those event logs did provide some surprises about how the different variations we saw in the system, but there is still some knowledge and tribal knowledge about your business that are helpful to really figure out, all right, now how do we take it to the next step? It's the combination of that experience, the business knowledge you already have in your organization, plus the objective view of how your system observes the process that really gets you to this next step, to really understand, here's how we've laid out the business process, but now that we see the variations we didn't expect or the bottlenecks we didn't expect, here's how we can modify this process and turn it into the model that we want it to be. And as we look at that new model of how we need to adjust the process in order to alleviate variations, we also begin to start seeing where is the best opportunity to actually put automation. And talking about that automation, when we think about what is robotic process automation, it's really about software robots that we want to implement, again, to really use that to execute on repetitive tasks. The example Brenda gave was really a great one, taking one data set just to import it and really retype it into another data set. It's a perfect example of where automation and RPA really shines. But it is really using this data to go into there to be able to look at each one of those processes and really understand where's the best place to apply that automation. And I think that's really the key and the advantage of using this cycle. The last point on that I want to bring up is it really using this cycle, it allows us to close this loop. Because once you take all the information you've gathered from process mining, apply process intelligence on top of that, implement your own understanding and tribal knowledge that you have in your business to identify where to automate, it's bringing that all the way back around to continue to use the process mining and process intelligence tool set, sort of continuously close this loop and continually iterate through this. And the best approach, the way to approach deciding what we want to automate, because I know on the polling question, we did see that There was one of the concerns is really about being overwhelmed and not really knowing where to start. If we iterate through the process in small batches of change, continuously being able to monitor that through that cycle, that's going to give you the information you need to know about where to start. And then even in the middle of the implementation, understand how to pivot and change based on that feedback you're continuously getting in that loop. So thank you for that, and I'll pass it back to Brenda.
Thanks, Andrew. Now, I know what some people are thinking. Wait a minute, you upload your event logs, you look at all of the variations, you analyze where the bottlenecks are, and then you design your process for automation. And we didn't ever talk about a windowless room with flip chart paper and sticky notes. I'm really sorry. We're going to eliminate that part of the process, and I know that's going to be a disappointment to some people. But next chart, Lauren. The bottom line is we're trying to make it easy. We're trying to give businesses the tools to say, because remember, some of you answered, I don't even know where to start. So the answer is start with information. Start with accurate information about how your business is being run. Look at the maps. Look at the bottlenecks. I mean, when you get your own maps, you'll see it really highlights. It almost looks like a heat map. What Andrew just showed had the red spots. It actually looks like a heat map where you're able to see where the bottlenecks are and where you have too much labor, excessive errors, etc. And so those become like the low-hanging fruit. So rather than overthinking, how do I redesign an entire process? Look at the process and take on steps within the process where you can get some quick wins. It's very interesting. I use that term. Just Monday, I made a call on a customer, and he had in his mind what he wanted us to attack in terms of his business. So I showed him a demo of a use case, and he said, "I want that one." And the reason he said was because that feels like a quick win. If I could do that, and immediately my business would start realizing some incremental revenue, then it makes all the rest of the projects that come on the back of it easier, because the people will feel that we had a win. It was easy to implement. We're starting to see customer service improve. We're starting to see more revenue. And then the ones that are just optimization and productivity are easier to attack. So I would say take the same approach. Look for the quick win, and based on information, take something easy, feel what success looks like, and then take the harder ones as you get more experience with the automation process. So that's what I wanted to wrap. I want to turn it back to Dave because I think he wants to open up the Q&A.
Thank you, Brenda. Very interesting comments from Brenda and from Andrew. We are now at our Q&A period. Anna, any questions coming through the chat? Because if there aren't, I certainly have a few of my own.
Just a reminder for anyone to please submit your questions in the lower right-hand side. I think we have one that's come up a few times, so this is probably also on your list, Dave. Someone wants to hear a little bit more from Rick to talk about how long did this overall process take? How long did it take maybe to map the processes and identify any gaps? Looking for some more details around that.
So yeah, I would probably summarize by saying it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I think, Brenda, you were spot on when you said that, you know, what we had done was started assimilating data. We didn't really apply the intelligence to that data, the process intelligence to that data. We were just kind of assimilating it. And I think when your team intersected with ours, the data that we brought over was really processed fairly quickly. You know, I think it was a matter of, you know, probably a couple of hours on a couple of days. And we were able to immediately harvest tangible data that could help improve our customer service process and potentially introduce some revenue opportunities in that. So, and that's probably, you know, the rookie season's always the easiest season. So maybe we just got lucky on the first run, but it was surprisingly quickly. Yes, it was.
Great. Anna, anything else come in?
Yep, we've got two more questions right now. Can you give a real example of success? It can be at a high level, but the presentation was theoretical and people are looking for some concrete examples.
Yeah, happy to. That's a think of one so here's an interesting one that will apply to a lot of manufacturers. So we worked with a company that was they are in fact a solar array manufacturer. So they produce not the solar panels, but all of the large mechanical and non-mechanical devices, parts of the solar systems. So these systems are huge. So when they get an order, they have to find a shipper that's going to take it, and the shippers vary based on where it's going and when it needs to get there. So they're working with a lot of shippers, maybe about 10 or 12 different shippers, and they have to go into different portals to access this. Their problem was days to revenue was really long. And they were saying from the time we ship it to the time we collect it, it's too long, and they invoice daily. So what we were able to find was the bottleneck was where the accounts receivable people were having to check all those portals multiple times a day to try to find the manifest, the proof of delivery. And this was a visual match against a shipment because you're looking for signatures and things like that. And every manifest is different based on the companies. So it was a mess. And just telling you, not a job people loved, checking in 30 times a day to a portal. So what we did was we built a bot that would go in and every 2 minutes scan these portals using OCR to read the manifests and then match them against shipments. And a couple of things happened. One is we were able to improve days to revenue by almost 12 days. So it was a huge improvement for them. And this is a company that was growing a lot. So that was a lot. We also did save a lot of labor because now those people are not doing that anymore, which was not a big deal. As I told you before, people aren't looking to release people. They're looking to redeploy them on higher value work. But the last thing was that we found $16 million of revenue leakage. What I mean by that, there was $16 million of manifests that had never been matched against the shipments, either because they were difficult to read or the human eye is just less accurate than the bot. So when we put that bot in place within 30 days, they were able to realize $16 million. Now, mind you, we did not charge them $16 million. Just letting you know, it was a good deal for them.
Missed opportunity there.
I know, I didn't have you there advising us, Dave.
Okay, thank you for that. Anna, any other questions come in from our audience? We want to give preference to those.
Yeah, we've got one last question here, asking if EPSoft could describe how an RPA fits in and integrates with an existing manufacturing ERP system.
Good question. Or multiple systems, ERP systems, because many companies have multiple systems. Brenda, you want to take that one, or Andrew?
Yeah, I can start, and then Brenda, please jump in. You know, there's always concern around when you're trying to integrate something like this, when you're talking about bots and that sort of thing. From a technology perspective, you know, there's concerns about secret management, or how does it integrate, or is there any risk that I'm really opening up my system to when I'm trying to integrate this sort of automation technology against it. And you know, that's a real question and a real concern. And so it's really important that you, as you use tools and as you partner with companies who do this, that the security implications of using RPA is something they have experience with, and something that that is really a top of mind as they use these systems, especially with some of these legacy systems. A number of these legacy systems, they don't really open up, and they're usually closed systems. They don't necessarily have some of the more modern type APIs that are against that platform. And so it's really, you know, the idea behind RPA is that we are able to democratize the integration of those systems together with RPA, with more business, you know, business folks who have somewhat of a technical talent. But that technical talent doesn't have to be anything really more than real experience with something like Microsoft Access, or real deep experience with Excel and how do you write macros and those kinds of things. It is a little bit more technical, but it's something that you probably already have embedded within your organization today. So I think it really is just about making sure that, one, you have those people who understand the system, making sure that you've got the right tool that knows how to integrate with those legacy platforms and knows how to do it in a way that is secure. And Brenda, if you've got anything to add to that.
Okay.
No, I think that's it. Yeah, I think that we tend to mostly work with the business side of the house versus the IT. I mean,
Right.
we integrate with the IT people, but we really start with what business problems we're trying to solve.
Yep.
Okay, I think we're at the point in the session where we'd like to wrap up the Q&A now, and we want to go into a demo of the EPSoft tool now, so you can really see at a granular level how this thing works and how you might apply it in your own organization. So Brenda, do you want to give us a little demo?
Yeah, let me know if you can see my screen. So
Yep.
I want to show you, it's less a demo than it is really a video of what this looks like. So I want to make sure I set people's expectations that, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is really a case study, and it applies to the last question because this was an SAP customer. So this is a mid-market SAP customer that came to us because they knew they were having challenges in their accounts payable system. A lot of it was missed due dates and invoice rework. And so they were trying to evaluate ways that they could save money by streamlining the process. And so we were able to, and this shows how the system, this is that part where Andrew was talking about uploading the event log. So I'll stop right there because that moved really fast. But basically those event logs come to us as a CSV file. So they're large files. And in this case, we took a little over 2,000 cases. So 2,000 invoices that were paid. And this squiggly screen here is basically the complete view. So when we upload this, the system produces a view that aggregates all of the variants and gives us one view of that. That's not on its own interesting, but you can see over here on the side, it then numbers out the different, there's 8 variations of how this accounts payable process is performed, and you can see sort of how it works on a time basis. You can also click on any one of these, in this case, scan the invoice, and you can see what's the mean duration, the minimum and the maximum duration. You can do that on every one of these boxes, so you can learn more about what's really happening inside those steps. And then you can also see a graph view. Now, what I'm going to show you quickly is also not just the complete view, but now we want to say, how can I learn a little bit about the most common view? So this is it. This is the most common view, which doesn't show much of a problem, right? The invoice is getting scanned, and then it's getting posted and cleared. So on the surface, the customer would say, we don't really have a problem. Most of the time, it goes really well. So let's look at now the fastest throughput. The fastest throughput is where the invoice is actually coming in electronically and it's able to be posted almost right. Probably things that are auto pays, things that they know it's a regular bill. But then what is about the slowest throughput? The slowest throughput shows where validating the receipt of the goods becomes a really big bottleneck. When you click through these, you'll see some more information about the time. I'm not going to take you through all of that, but this would give you some data about why this one is the slowest throughput and why we could be having a problem where in that validation of receipt. We also looked at the least common variant. And in the least common variant, there was a big mess, because even though it was only 5% of the cases, it ended up being a very expensive part of their cases. So in this case, we are having to rework the invoice, change the payment terms, change the baseline date, because the invoice comes in and it's mismatched against the purchase order. So that was creating a lot of hand management before these things could be cleared. And in most cases, we were missing the due date. And this shows how we then, the system does not produce these automatically. But we were able to capture some additional information from the customer about the size and the dates on these invoices. And so we were able to then map some more information for them on how much they were missing. In this case, the big issue was they were missing discounts for early payment, and they were also being penalized for late payments. So this one, now the next step is generating the BPM. You saw that a little bit in Andrew's charts, where we can now map out what does the current process look like. And then let's compare it to a desired one. So we can look at where are the bottlenecks. As I said, it shows up a bit like a heat map, shows you where your big bottlenecks are. And then you're able to design a process, an optimal process that automates those steps where you have a problem. And in this case, and then also, by the way, when you do that, it really lists out what are you changing? What are the specific parts that are being changed? And so that's the bot. Here's the bot design that comes out as a result of choosing those steps that you want to automate. And it's quite simple. The design is roughed out there. You have to give it credentials to sign in to certain databases, to have access to files. But once you do that, you save it. And here's a really cute animation of what it looks like. In this case, we've decided to take the invoices, have the bot match it against purchase orders. And in the event that there's a perfect match, the bot's going to clear that immediately. That invoice is going to be scheduled based on the terms. But now we might have a different situation where the invoice is being checked against a purchase order. It finds it, but as we search all of the critical information, we find a mismatch. And so that one is now set to be handled by a person. And in this case, you can see there's a bunch of them that are being set for a person, and all the rest of these are being immediately cleared. So we've now taken a lot of steps, manual steps, out of the hands of the agents, and they're only handling the exceptions. And in this case, with this client, setting up those bots was a huge productivity tool for their accounts payable, but they were actually able to realize $50,000 a month in benefit from the standpoint of taking advantage of early payment discounts and avoiding penalties. So that was, a huge opportunity for them. I'll stop sharing now somehow, or you can grab, Anna, you can grab control back.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. We are slightly past the hour. So I want to respect everybody's time, and just a quick reminder that EPSoft is offering use of their process intelligence tool, expert process specialists, and data scientist services free of charge for the first 10 companies that claim by visiting epsoftinc.com/offer/. I want to thank our speakers, Rick, Brenda, and Andrew. And lastly, a plug for our upcoming Manufacturing Leadership Council events. Lauren, if you could put that slide up, our Rethink Conference, which is going to be virtual this year in October. If you don't know about it, haven't been there, please check us out. I think you will find it most interesting and informative on your journey to Manufacturing 4.0. So once again, thank you all for attending today. I'm David Brosell. Look forward to seeing you on future Manufacturing Leadership Council and National Association of Manufacturers webinars. Good day.